Hello, world. My next guest is editor-in-chief and co-founder of one of the industry's leading providers of insight, best practice, and professional development information for B2B marketers. A sought-after speaker and passionate evangelist for all things B2B, he's been invited to speak for the internal marketing teams of O2, Ernst Young, Fujitsu, PwC, Experian, HPE, Thomas Reuters, Accenture, and so much more, just to name a few. And now, joining me today on the Radically Transparent podcast is Joel Harrison, editor-in-chief and co-founder of B2B Marketing, the #1 go-to resource for B2B marketers across the globe. Joel, are you ready to get radically transparent with me?
I have never been so ready to be radically transparent. I'm so excited about this.
You know, I have to say the same. I may have been fangirling the minute that I found out you were going to be on the show. I've been following you for a while. Your content's phenomenal, and I'm really excited that you've volunteered to get radically transparent.
I'm so flattered to be invited. It's lovely, and you know, very big admirer of what Oktopost do. So you know, lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So listen, because I like you, I'm going to start with an easier question. Still important nonetheless. I think it's fascinating, the answers we have on the show, but what you're doing today is very unique, I think, especially as we've seen, right, this digital transformation. Most of our media is consumed online, B2B marketing, magazine, you know, the kind of the evolution of where we all are today. Can you give us a brief look at your professional journey and how you found yourself in the world of B2B marketing to begin with? And what was going through your head even creating, right, B2B marketing?
What the hell were you thinking? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes.
Okay, I'll try and give you this in a really potted history, because I could do. There's the short version. There's a really long version. So I'm a journalist by trade, right? That's what I love most. Wordsmith. I love words. I love writing, and I got into that at university and really enjoyed it. And then left university, wanted to start writing about stuff. And my dad was always in marketing. He's a direct marketer, so that seemed like a natural place to go. So I wound up editing publications there. And then I have the friend from university who was when I've been publishing, and we're like, let's work for ourselves. What could we do? We both know about marketing. He's a marketer working for a legal publication. Mm-hmm. Let's launch a magazine. And then we like, well, where the marketing's the middle ground, where's the gap? And in the UK at the time, this is pushing 20 years ago now, right? This is literally 20 years ago now when we're talking about this. There were like about 15 marketing magazines, but nothing on B2B. And when you looked at it, you thought, that's ridiculous. How can there's all this stuff around, you know, sales promotion and digital and design and PR, and you name it, whatever way you wanted to split it, there wasn't anything on B2B, which is like at least half the market. And the more we thought about it, the more ridiculous it was. So we launched this publication, and you know, and it felt like a kind of like a exciting journey. I never had an aspiration to be an entrepreneur, to launch a business, but we did, and it's been incredibly exciting. So much evolution along the way, and I guess I'm still kind of a journalist, but I'm so passionate about B2B because B2B, when we launched it in the US, was a very well established, mature industry. Mm-hmm. In the UK, it was, and everywhere else in the world, it seemed extremely embryonic. And what we've seen in that period is it's blossomed. And no small part of that is due to the MarTech companies like yourselves, who are just enabling marketing at much more opportunities. So yeah, that's it. Was that short enough?
No, it's interesting. You know, 20 years ago, right? So what you were saying about B2B, when you were looking at the space in terms of magazines, there was nothing, and it's shocking. Well, Oktopost was founded about 8 years ago. And in the social media management space, there was nothing geared towards B2B. So, right, it's still, to me, why I think B2B is certainly becoming more interesting, more seen, catching up, if you will, but it's still, in terms of the MarTech stack, in terms of a lot of areas of what marketers are familiar with, it's still not forefront. But I do think 2022 is the year.
I think you're right. I think it's come on leaps and bounds, but I'm very, very eager to not have this poor relation thing about B2B, because I think there was a lot of that in the past. Yeah. We don't need to do that anymore, right? It's a distinct part of marketing. It has its own dynamics, its own challenges. and it's all about the fact that it's the sales are complex, the products are complex, they're expensive, multiple stakeholders. That's different from consumer. And so let's not beat ourselves up. What we do is different, it's unique, it's better. It's so much more exciting, it's so much more compelling. I love the complexity. And I get, is that what do you feel that as well?
I'm addicted to it. I mean, I can't escape it even if I wanted to. It's exciting, right? And maybe I need to get out more if I think the journey and customer journey through a funnel is like super exciting, but it really is. And especially when you have intent data, how do you use it? How do you analyze where are people engaging in content? And where this kind of leads me to is, if anyone goes, right, go ahead, and if you're near your computer, go ahead and do this. But if you head over to LinkedIn and you take a look at Joel's following, right, you have a ridiculous following. I'm just going to share it. 38,895 followers on LinkedIn alone. So
that's the brand, not me, right? Just to be clear.
So it's the brand, not you, but you're right? What's behind a brand? The people, right? And people connect with people they like, they can relate to. But what I want to understand a little bit from you is, right, that's a lot of followers. I mean, that's like idol status, if you will, for any B2B brand who's trying to find their way on social. First of all, can you dive a little bit into what is B2B marketing? Who is it intended for? The concept. Okay. And then why do you think B2B marketers and leaders are so obsessed with it? Because it gets a lot of buzz.
Well, okay. So that's a big question, a great question. I'm delighted to talk about that. I mean, so how we describe ourselves at the moment, we're a community. We always have been in a kind of small C way, but as of last year, a year ago yesterday, we launched something called Propolis, which is a closed community for B2B marketers. And we're positioning it because we believe it is, and it will be the new home for B2B marketers. And it's a place where you can share and discuss and learn and collaborate with your peers at whatever level you need to be, in whatever topic you need to have, whatever industry. And that's how people are sharing information. We closed the magazine a year ago. It was a legacy product. It probably outlived its lifespan, but everyone was very fondly attached to it. So we're a community. We run events. We run 4 conferences a year in the UK, although they're all hybrid. So you can come wherever you are in the world. And we have one in the US with a massive awards program, which is we had in November, which is one of those evenings. It's like what they said about the 1960s. If you can remember it, then you weren't really there. So that's who we are. We're a community, we're an information resource. But in terms of the other question, why do people get excited? I think, it goes back to what I was saying earlier on. I think in the States, I feel that the B2B marketing has been better established for longer. There are many more people operating in that space, both the vendors and also media companies or conference producers. We're there too. But in the UK and Europe, there wasn't really anybody. And I think when we came along, people went, oh, thank goodness, someone is talking about this. Someone's taking it seriously. And it was like moths to a lamp, right? You're gathering around because someone was actually talking your language. And that was one of the things about the awards night, why it wasn't so successful. There are loads of marketing awards programs, but our big night we have in London, it's an opportunity to celebrate success in front of people who know what it means and understand the complexity inherent in doing great B2B marketing.
So it's interesting. So just processing what you've just shared, because there's a lot of, right, that we bring back the word complexity here. There's a lot of complex elements into what you're doing. And I can't imagine that it's easy, right? Because how do you constantly stay relevant, right? But in your eyes, what is keeping you up at night professionally as editor-in-chief, or even when you're speaking to marketing leaders, right? What's keeping them up?
Well, I think one of the things is, as you say, just to make sure you're on top of people's agendas. But every time I speak to our leaders, our CMOs, I always am tremendously inspired by talking to them and understanding their challenges. And so that's just, I go away from those conversations enthused about what I'm going to do to respond to that. And this is a problem, and this is a question, and that's a priority. And I've got to try and galvanize that. But I think in terms of the challenge, at the moment, I'm also a kind of part-time job for me as a producer of our events. And we run 5 conferences a year. So I'm always kind of currently constantly juggling 3, if not 4 conferences. And I'm trying to work out what content we need to pull in and which speakers we can pull in, and how this overlaps with that. also we're conferences are changing in terms of they're no longer just a moment in time. They tend to be a kind of a more a longer period of time. So we're trying to bring the content into the community, and so you can get access to some of it beforehand, some of it afterwards, some of it on demand. So that is my current, that's what I'm working into the night trying to do, to make sure I brief the right person the right way about the right thing. Yeah, I guess also just making sure you've got the right energy in the community as well, having the right people, and making sure the right people are switched on in terms of what they've got to do. There's lots going on.
It's like I just picture a conductor in front of an orchestra. That's kind of how I picture you, kind of, the events go, writers go, but it's how do you orchestrate all of that to have it come together, and then probably not sleeping as it all comes together. Like at what point does it all come together?
Well, I mean, it always, I think my experience as a magazine editor is that you have a finite amount of time to produce the best magazine you ever can do, right? And obviously I don't do that anymore, but my kind of modus operandi is the same. I want to fill every minute with the best possible content and use every bit of insight in the best possible way, and that means that I fill all my time up. I'm always chasing my tail, but I want to do the best possible job. I'm passionate about the subject. I'm passionate about the industry and the community. And I want to be the conduit of people to say things like you've said, that we're useful, we're relevant, we help you understand what's going on, and we help you do your jobs better. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I love that. Now, listen, I wasn't keeping score, but you may have said the word community. I think it was like 9 times, and maybe we're 5 minutes in. So, right. I just want to dive into this, because not only has community become a buzzword for any marketer, right? Everyone's, let's create community, customer communities. We need to create employee communities. We want to build community. This word is getting thrown around right now, left and right. So can you help us define in 2022, what do you mean by community? And right, you mentioned a closed community, open community. What are some of the trends you're seeing right now when it comes to building and maintaining an influential one?
Okay, so really good question, and it is definitely a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it also, by definition, is open to huge interpretation. You can mean this or mean that. When I'm talking about a closed community, I'm talking about a community that you have to be a paid up member to be a part of, right? Okay. So our members are enterprise level down to SMB, B2B marketing firms in technology, professional services, financial services, and then a long tail of people like energy, automotive, manufacturing, things like that. So that's the difference in a closed community and an open community. LinkedIn, we have a LinkedIn group. I think we're going to talk about that later on, and which, let's say, has less value and authority, but there was a time when that was different. Yes. So our community is closed, and you have to pay to be part of it, and we moderate it, and we bring we have it's inside, it's called propolis, and propolis is a word relating to bees. It's a Greek word, but it refers to the resin that bees use to create the hives, and the hives, and so we have 8 hives within inside there, and relating to different aspects of B2B marketing. I'm sorry if I'm going too deep here.
I love it. Maybe we need to start a trend here. Maybe we need to move away from community and we need B2B hives.
Well, I mean, so the hives are these 8 areas, and each one of them is moderated or kind of by an expert in that area, and so they're people who can answer questions and provide knowledge and insightful views on what's going on there, and so that's in terms of so that's kind of how it's structured. In terms of kind of the trends for what makes a great community. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in communities. I'm an expert in what we're trying to do. I don't have the time that I'd like to have to be spending in other people's communities. A great deal, but a little bit here and there. But I think the key thing, what makes it work, is stickiness, right? And in terms of that's the same as any kind of marketing, and objectivity. That's why a closed community is different to an open community. You know that the people in there are there because there's a gate, and they're only in, so you're not going to get people selling at you, and you can trust the objectivity and the reliability of the information and the perspectives you're getting. And for me, like I was saying earlier on, understanding what the customers need and want at different levels is critical. So spending time with the customers and listening to their concerns and pain points, and sometimes working hard to tease it out of them. Sometimes they don't volunteer it. That's a big part of my job as well. So and different people want different things at different levels. So yeah, those are some of the things which I think are critical to running a closed community.
It's interesting, right? So this closed community, what I've seen, and you can keep me honest, right? And we kind of joked about it, right? LinkedIn groups at one point were extremely effective before they were hijacked by marketers and then, completely lost their value. And I think now whenever you say LinkedIn group to a B2B marketer, they're no LinkedIn group. But what I found fascinating when it comes to community on social is that on Facebook for B2B marketers, there's actually quite a lot of groups on Facebook that seem to have quite large communities, be extremely active. And I've spoken and tried to interview to try to understand this trend a little bit, because most organizations will be on LinkedIn focused on their B2B strategy, knowing that that's where their customers and prospects are hanging out. Yet Facebook rather, there's still a lot of communities on Facebook. And when I was speaking to some of the community members in different B2B groups, it was fascinating that some shared with me that they actually preferred Facebook groups because on LinkedIn, there's a persona that you need to be a thought leader and the expert. And because it was connected with where you work or your position, people were afraid to actually ask the difficult questions, or when they needed help, that they felt actually more comfortable doing that on Facebook. So my next question is around kind of what makes a community great, but also, right, you're talking about closed community. Where should marketers be hosting their communities? I mean, what kind of forums or technology, or like, how do you know, like, do you open your own, place? Do you use social?
So I think that's a really good point, right? And I think, and it's worth saying that, that I may, we talked about open and closed communities. I talked about communities, the big C and a little c. And what I meant by that was, we have a platform and a place which is built on some technology called Zapnito, and you can edit that out if you'd like to. But there are technology companies that do this, and Zapnito do a great job. And there are other providers in the market as well. And obviously, then you can have communities within social media platforms. You can have the LinkedIn groups, which are kind of they're a construct, right? There's a place where you go in and you're there. But there's a small C community, is just the wider group of people that you're interacting with on an informal level over a period of time. And I think, we had a community with a small c long before we had a community with a big C. We knew, and it was informal, flexible, sometimes blurred at the edges, and sometimes people went in and out. But that is, I think that always exists around organizations and entities, and it's about galvanizing it and making it happen. I don't think running community is right for everybody. It's not like, I know that, as you said, it's a buzzword, a lot of attraction, a lot of attention, but I'm not saying everyone should go out and do it. It's interesting that a lot of companies doing it are former media companies, because, as we discussed, it's very hard to make print sell anymore, if at all. And you tend to see media companies seem to going into data products or communities, or maybe even a bit of both. So yeah, that's. Does that answer your question?
It does. And it gives a lot of food for thought, because especially around, I think, social, in like 2012, 2008, earlier on, when social was coming to the forefront, there was kind of this notion that you needed to be everywhere, right? And to catch your clients. And I do think over time that has evolved to be like, go where your customers are and then be better than anybody else in that space, as opposed to be everywhere. Would you say that?
I think that's really right. And by the way, I just wanted to come back to your point about Twitter, which is, about Facebook, was the thing I forgot just now, because I've got to say, I'm really interested by that. I'm not, and we don't do very much on Facebook, and it was a conscious effort. And I think it does vary geographically and also by sector as well. I think in the UK, it tends to be Facebook is for my social time, and the demographic, the sense I'm getting is demographic is polarizing quite dramatically, and whether there's kind of negative PR around Facebook, should we say, which I don't think makes you warm to spend more time there. the sense I get is that people who are using B2B on Facebook tend to be on the kind of small business end of the spectrum, where probably there's more of a blurred line between the individual, the persona of the person at work and the persona of the person at home, where it doesn't matter so much if you're blurred, because if you're a business person, you're kind of always, you're running a small business, you're always on, right? You're never going to shut down. So I think that's why that's the case. I know I've just lost your question originally. Did I answer it, or did I talk about something else?
You hit it. You hit it. What I want to do, I'm gonna shift for a moment, because there's another buzzword. I don't really want to get started on it, but I do want to throw it at you, right? In your opinion, what do you think some of the biggest challenges that B2B marketers are facing today?
I think we're in a really interesting place right now in B2B marketing, because I think the industry has matured sufficiently to be more credible and for professionals to have more authority in the business. And I think that was happening anyway, but I think COVID has really accelerated that. And I think the period immediately after lockdown, and I think the UK and well, companies did it different speed. Countries did it different times and speeds, and but certainly in the UK, and I think in the US, maybe a slightly different timeline. There was a you could all of a sudden people were locked down, and salespeople couldn't get in front of their customers. Yeah. So no one was buying, and you couldn't sell. So what that meant is, what can you talk about? You've got to talk about something. What are you going to talk about? So it tended to be a conversation about brand and about being helpful, and that was fantastic. That was brilliant, because it allowed marketers to talk about brand and just not get sucked into that lead generation spiral, which is necessary for business, but it actually wasn't helping in the long run. And I think it allowed people to refocus on brand. Yeah. Then I think you've got the but it also, and it enabled marketers to be the engine of transformation in businesses as well, in a way that they hadn't had the credibility to do before, because the board had to listen to marketers, because salespeople had the ear of the customer, but often it was a bit transactionally orientated, shall we say, rather than objectively orientated. So marketers, I think particularly senior ones, have benefited hugely in that period. So challenge we've got right now is harnessing that momentum to drive positive transformation in the business, and not to get sucked up in the hype, as you say, because there is hype, and some of it is not based on anything. Let's just say that. I'm being very diplomatic. So yeah, but I do think it's a really fabulous time in B2B right now.
So okay, so we kind of talked like where we're at, but where are we heading? Because right, we've kind of evolved, right? Human to human connection, as you were saying, right? What problems are we solving? How we can be helpful?
I think we're going in a really good direction. I think it's only the industry and the practitioners that only become more credible. I think inevitably it's going to be more technology orientated. It's about, as practitioners, to balance that kind of insight data brain with the creative brain, and deploy the technologies at the right time and not get swept away with the hype. Marketing has, if you look at the kind of the sales journey is so complex. It's not just about handing over a lead at a certain point. Marketing is always engaged throughout the journey, and that places marketing in a great position, not subservient to sales anymore, and better able to take a preeminent role. So we're going into a more strategic place. We're going to a place which is more authority, the ability to drive the business, to be responsible for customer experience, which is one of those areas where is always put into the kind of the too hard tray. And I have so much optimism and enthusiasm for the future.
I agree. So my next set of questions, so there's 3, and it's like an either or, right? So I'll give you I'll give you a word and then 2 options, right? Okay, ready? LinkedIn groups, kill them, keep them.
I have to be a little bit careful because we've still got one, but the value I see is I don't see very much value at all. It's only because we haven't really got a clear structure about why we still got ours, to be quite honest. And maybe by the time you listen to this, it won't be there at all.
All right. Twitter evolution. Good or bad? Interpret that as you wish.
I think it's inevitable that things should evolve. I don't think it's probably evolving as fast as I'd like it to see it. I still think Twitter, we should see more people on Twitter, and I think Twitter's biggest challenge is to get more people there and engaging. And I think people are still a bit nervous about Twitter. So I think it should continue to evolve. Definitely, it definitely can't stand still. Was there any particular aspect of that you wanted to ask me about?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is specifically with marketers, right? There's kind of this, marketers love Twitter. Brands, I think, see Twitter often, especially in the B2B space. You're on LinkedIn and Twitter. Sometimes, first comes LinkedIn, and Twitter's the helper network, if you will, or the supporting player. But Twitter moves so fast. So,
yeah,
right. So how do you keep up with everything? And as a brand, I mean, it's tough to engage 24/7. So I think Twitter is a challenging network to play on. And so I just didn't know, from someone who is,
I agree. I agree. It is challenging, and it's capricious. Somebody, guy called Tim Hughes, who's social media influencer. I don't know if you know Tim. If you've not spoken to Tim, you should definitely do a podcast with him because he's great.
Tim Hughes, are you listening? If you are,
Tim. He said, I think, I'm not sure it was his quote, it was someone else's, but it's everyone's on LinkedIn, interesting people are on Twitter. And I think that's very true. I think you have to be there because there's conversations going on and people are there to express opinions. And if you're not part of the conversation, then you're not able to influence or at least understand what's happening or what sentiment is. Even if it's only a small section of your community, you still need to be there. So it's kind of a maddening place. I find it frustrating, and it took me a long time to love Twitter, but I do love it now, I think.
If you had any advice for any B2B marketers struggling specifically with the Twitter network, what advice would you give for them to love Twitter a little more?
I think a starting point, it took me a long time to do, even though I had this advice a long time before I actually enacted on it, was just to make it relevant to you. So work out what it is that interests you. Don't just treat it as a work channel, because it never is. Work out, even though people use it for work out what you're interested in and follow those people or people that relate to that. And then your stream will be relevant to you. It won't just be a series of tweets about work-related stuff and boring people talking about brands. I'm sorry if that's really obvious, but it took me a long time to get that. And commit to it, and don't be scared of offering your own opinion and sharing stuff about you. And I don't share as much as I know that I should, but people want to see, on a personal level, they want to see both sides of you. They want to see your work thoughts, and they want to see what you do at the weekends and interesting things you're doing. And often you'll find people find it easier to engage with stuff that is absolutely not work related, which then leads on to work conversation, than they would if they were talking about your latest product release, funnily enough.
No, it's interesting. Twitter, like I said, Twitter to me is fascinating, and I appreciate the transparency on kind of what took you some time to learn and how we can all improve our presence a little bit more there. The last pick or choose question: social media, an art or a science when it comes to building a strategy?
I think it's got to be a bit of both.
Explain.
Well, it's like any form of marketing, right? Your strategy should define the framework within which you operate and your objectives, but execution is about art. And if you don't, and particularly in Twitter, the dynamics of creativity are different to advertising or emails or outdoor or TikTok. You've got to, dare I say it, you've got to.
Are you on TikTok?
Funnily enough, I'm not. But our campaign that won the Grand Prix at the B2B Marketing Awards was a TikTok campaign. It was
Congratulations.
So there you go. And I think it blew everyone's minds that everyone could be B2B on TikTok. But so I think you have 140 characters or whatever to be, and that requires to be engaging and to get your message across in an engaging way. It's not just about reducing your 500-word article down to 140 characters. It's about doing that in a way that's interesting. Otherwise, you might not even bother. So, it has to be both. I mean, I just put other definitions, it could be, you could say it's a sausage factory, or you could say, is it a pyramid scheme? I don't know. Those are two other ways you could describe social media.
Well, you know what? In the next guest I ask that question, perhaps I will borrow your new phrases there, and I'll see how we can go forward. Joel, my last question for you. We've been talking a lot about community, social media, what's keeping you up at night. And the one thing I truly love about social media is how you can learn so much about a person. The challenge I have with LinkedIn, even though that is where I live and breathe, is you can only learn so much from a LinkedIn profile. So what I'm curious to ask you today is, what's one thing you can tell us about yourself that's not on your LinkedIn profile?
I mean, there's lots of things I could tell you about myself that aren't on my LinkedIn profile, as you rightly suggest. I mean, the thing that actually is on my LinkedIn profile for my Twitter profile, because the very reason is I'm one of the things that is my escape is I love history and I love architecture, and historical architecture is my thing. So it's not a particularly fun fact, but it's what interests me, and I think it's a way of, it's a beautiful pictorial thing, and you can, it's a great way of, you can share stuff like that on pictures and images and facts, and connecting with people who are interested in those things certainly bring Twitter alive to me and make me want to go there more often, and make me want to go there at the weekend. Yeah, so there you go. There's one thing.
Art and architecture, or history and architecture.
History and architecture, yeah.
So two questions there, just to wrap up, right? A long time ago, I took a class in high school, art history AP, and I remember learning about the names of the pillars in Greek architecture, right? Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, and we had a whole song to remember them. So I just want to ask, right? Architecturally, what's your favorite style?
Oh, well, there was a great article recently by a guy I follow. I originally from a town called Bristol, which is in the west of England. And it was slightly. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not going to digress there. There was a style that emerged very briefly in the Victorian period called Bristol Byzantine, which was like it was like a Victorian elaborate style, which kind of harked back to Byzantium period, which is like Turkey and the kind of the Holy Roman Empire, back in the kind of I think it's like the 700s or something like that. And it's this incredibly decorative period that was very short-lived, and there's only like about 10 buildings that qualify for it, but that's beautiful. I love historic buildings. I love modern buildings as well, and I think you can appreciate them both in different ways. I also, Art Deco is probably my favorite kind of it's because I think it's just so wistful of the future, and of the future that they thought was going to happen that didn't quite happen, but there we go.
I love that, and it doesn't surprise me that you'd be a fan of Art Deco, because you seem to be someone who's always on the front foot, so that makes sense to me. So with that, Joel, of course, anyone listening in, they'd like to continue the conversation about history or architecture, or more importantly, B2B marketing, where's the best place that we can reach you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter, Joel_B2B editor. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. There aren't that many Joel Harrisons on LinkedIn, but I think I'm the one that comes up first. Or you can email me, joel.harrison@b2bmarketing.net.
Fantastic, Joel. Thank you so much for getting radically transparent with me today. And I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Radically Transparent podcast, brought to you by Oktopost, the only social media management and employee advocacy platform architected for B2B. I'm Jennifer Gutman, your host and director of social strategy here at Oktopost. And if you love today's show, we'd love if you subscribe, rate, and give a raving review wherever you get your podcasts. For more discussion on B2B social media marketing, be sure to follow Oktopost on LinkedIn. And of course, to gain access to all our free social media marketing and employee advocacy resources, head on over to our website, www.oktopost.com. Until next time.